Evidence has been deleted from the January 6th Select Committee, which was illegally constituted under HR 503, by the way. But before they left, they were consolidating all of the data onto hard drives. And before they gave that data to Republicans, apparently, they sent it over to the White House, they sent it over to other lawyers, and they deleted files from the devices themselves. We're going to get into this. Report comes from Representative Loudermilk. Speaker Mike Johnson is also supporting him. And we've got a very interesting letter from our friend Steve Baker, who reports over from the Blaze, who's being jerked around by the Department of Justice. And he and his lawyers sent a very nice letter over to them saying, can you give us some clarity on what you're doing here? Because the January 6th prosecutions need some exposure. So here's the story. Evidence deleted. Representative Loudermilk shared this one. The background is that the House panel that is now investigating the Capitol riot, they want access to files that have been deleted. And we don't know who deleted these things, whether it was Liz Cheney or whoever. But here is the background. From New York Post, they tell us a House subcommittee investigating the J6 Capitol riots is trying to recover 117 encrypted files. Whew, that's a lot. That the now disbanded House Select J6 committee deleted before the Republicans came into power. A digital forensics team was employed by the House Administration Subcommittee, and they were able to recover password protected files. So when you delete, evidence from a hard drive, usually what you're just doing is deleting the directory. You're deleting the code that allows you to go retrieve those files. It doesn't actually wipe it from the device, but when you bring in new material on the device, it says that space is unallocated, so I can reuse that space. But if you don't bring in new devices, any new thing to sort of recycle that, you might actually have all of that data still there, even though you deleted your bin. So 117 encrypted files, they get the hard drive. They say, oh, thanks for this. This is nice. Let's plug that in. Anything that's undeleted, they find a bunch of it. Oh, weird. So the digital forensics team scopes the drive, and here they report this to Fox News. Now, Representative Morgan Griffith from Virginia, who sits on the subcommittee, confirmed that this is accurate, saying, yes, these reports are accurate. Unfortunately, at this time, we cannot determine what was in the deleted files. The Democrat-led J6 committee, said Greg Murphy, another representative, he says, they obviously took great strides to shield the information from us. But the question is why? What are they trying to hide? Their whole plan was to, quote, get to the truth of the matter, wasn't it? No. They obviously didn't want the real truth, just their truth. Representative, the panel chairman called Barry Loudermilk, he has written to the chairman, Benny Thompson, and I'm trying to track that letter down, but they got a copy of the letter obtained by the Post, and I wish these guys would just post their stuff on the internet. But Thompson claimed to have turned over 4 terabytes of digital files, but the hard drives, says Loudermilk, they contain less than 3 terabytes. So, when we pick up evidence from a prosecutor's office, generally they'll give us a table of contents. They'll say, hey, this is the hard drive. Here's what you got inside of it. We sign for it. We say, great, I acknowledge receipt of this. Here you go. Give us an exchange. Give us your permission. Give us the files. We have a nice exchange. So he says, there's 4 terabytes of digital files here. We open it up. Nope, there's only 3. So he told Thompson that the subcommittee also found numerous digital records from hard drives that were archived by the Select Committee and asked for, quote, a list of passwords to access these files and ensure that they are properly archived. Loudermilk said one recovered file disclosed the identity of an individual whose testimony was not archived by the Select Committee. Oh, isn't that curious? Why wasn't that person's testimony archived? So one of these deleted files says Clavicle Girl's sister, whatever. And we don't have Clavicle Girl's sister also in the logs. Why is that? So they deleted them, pointing out that Thompson had previously admitted that not all records were archived, only the stuff that they wanted to keep for themselves. And they deleted the rest of it. That's how disgusting these people are. They deleted evidence. Now, others included specific transcribed interviews and depositions to the White House and the DHS that were not archived with the clerk of the House. They just don't give it to you. If they did an actual legitimate investigation, we should see it all, right? Let us decide for ourselves. We don't need Liz Cheney's interpretation of her book report. Loudermilk has written follow-up letters to White House counsel and DHS asking for the unedited and unredacted transcripts. He demanded that both comply with the request by January 24th. They're not going to do that. Last week, we also know that Loudermilk got support on this from Mike Johnson. He explained that after a forensic analysis of the data, he was able to recover numerous digital records from hard drives archived by the Select Committee. One recovered file disclosed the identity of an individual whose testimony was not archived. Further, we found that most of the recovered files are password protected, preventing us from determining what they contain. So these morons obviously did not talk to Hillary Clinton, right? Because she used BleachBit, which deletes it and then rewrites over the actual physical drive, right? Reflashes the data so that you cannot recover it. You got to go get software to actually actually wipe it. They didn't do that. They're like, just put it in the recycle bin. Now, Loudermilk asked that Thompson give him a list of passwords so that he can access these files. He says, we don't even know what's been deleted or what's encrypted. Maybe the FBI will help. Actually, don't give it to them. They'll just lose the hard drive again. Now, if the former J6 committee has nothing to hide, then why don't they just let us see it? DHS responds to correspondence through oversight and official channels, said the department, but nobody else for Thompson is responding for a request for comment. So, of course, the cover-up continues. And as more and more people recognize this, I think that they're going to have less belief in the official fictional narrative that comes out from these people. Mike Johnson is supporting Loudermilk, saying the J6 committee was a partisan exercise determined to prove a political narrative regardless of the facts. Rather than delivering transparency and focusing on security failures, the committee obfuscated facts and they hid evidence. Now, I applaud Chairman Loudermilk and fully support the subcommittee on oversight to get clarity and not theater to the American people about exactly what occurred on that day. And we're looking forward to seeing that as well. Now, one person who was there chronicling everything that was happening that day is this guy, Steve Baker. And he does incredible work. We've already covered some of his work here before, but this time he could use some additional eyeballs because he's taken it to the DOJ. He's an investigative reporter for The Blaze, also is at tpc4usa.com, on X at tpc4usa. And he said this, here's a statement from my lawyers because he is being threatened. This guy has disclosed some very good stuff, including from the J6 officer who is now running for Congress about how he was dropping his magazine, how he was screaming at people from the halls of Congress, how he's kind of just unwell. He exposed him, got all the video, matched it up, and so the DOJ is now threatening him. They're now saying, we're going to charge you, even though he's a journalist and they didn't charge other journalists. So we're going to read through this letter, but he's shouting out Shipley, Bright, and others. You might know Shipley on X at Shipwrecked Crew, but here is what he says. Now, I want to thank everybody for their commitment to this fight, but I also want to thank them for fighting the underlying constitutional issues and fighting back against this blatant selective prosecutions against me, saying the DOJ and the FBI have put me through investigations and threats for over 2.5 years, while more than 100 identified individuals who we know their names on the FBI's most wanted list have not been charged. Why? Ray Epps got a probation deal. These weaponized agencies continue to allocate resources and ignore the more serious crimes, and they threaten and prosecute journalists who have entered restricted spaces, quote, without permission. Now, they're threatening him, but 60 other journalists who did the same thing as Steve are not being charged. Now, within days of my having broken significant stories about these lying cops and other improprieties, now the DOJ is going to go and charge him. They're looking to enact face-saving measures, saying this is despite the fact that these agencies know I did no violence or anything. In fact, the FBI agents that investigated me in my voluntary interview even thanked me for not doing any violence. Now, referring to the non-violent J6ers, former AG Bill Barr said if this administration had given the same attention to other areas of crime, we'd have the safest nation in the world. It's ridiculous. But instead, they just go after the right. But if this is the fight the DOJ wants, he says, I'm committed to doing it. I'm committed to fighting back. And I've got a growing team of attorneys, including former federal prosecutors, who are going to be jumping in on this. And so he's tagging a bunch of people. This is Steve Baker, and I'm going to repost this right now, my friends. So if you are on the X, you can go and follow that. But this is the letter that he sent over to the DOJ. Let's take a look. Writing to the Department of Justice, Steve Baker, who's under constant threat from our useless DOJ, publishes this. He says, this is my statement. My name is Stephen Baker. I'm a journalist. I'm now employed by Blaze Media, and I've been a freelance writer and journalist for more than 25 years. Says I've covered newsworthy events around our country for over 10 years. I went to Washington on January 6th, and just like dozens of other journalists, I covered the events on that day. But for more than 30 months, it has been said to me by representatives of the DOJ that I am under investigation. And twice, I've been told that an indictment charging me with crimes would be filed within a matter of days. But for the past 8 months, I have been reviewing non-public closed-circuit television and body-worn camera video in possession of Congress at the invitation of the Speaker of the House, that's Mike Johnson. I have found and I've published stories about video evidence that contradicts the claims that are made by the DOJ and evidence presented by the DOJ in various trials of the J6 defendants. And he's got evidence that these two, Harry Dunn and David Lazarus, were lying. After not having indicted me for 3 years, it is now clear that any move to do so now will be in direct retaliation for my amazing reporting. First, about apparently perjured testimony by key government witnesses called Harry Dunn and David Lazarus, two cops who lied, and now about the true identity of a passerby who discovered the pipe bomb outside the DNC headquarters. And guess what? The passerby, the guy who discovered that pipe bomb that they didn't really care too much about, even though Kamala was sitting right there, was actually a U.S. Capitol Capitol Police officer. So this guy's blowing the lid off all this stuff, okay? These two guys lied. Harry Dunn testified one way in trial. David Lazarus said, no, I was here over there during trial. And they all told opposite stories. So which one is lying? Or are they both? So Stevens says, I will not be intimidated. I will continue to report the findings of my investigation into the evidence that's being made for me to review. I'm reviewing it. Mike Johnson invited me to do this. I have followed and reported on dozens of trials of the J6 defendants, and the more I investigate, the greater my unease is what is being done in the name of justice. So incredible, right? Now, this is signed by all these attorneys. We're going to read it here, but I just want to introduce you to the people behind this. James Lee Bright, Shipley, Tarpley, Linder, Gaillard, Saradini, and Bright. Shout out to these American patriots and heroes of the law. Here is what they say. The undersigned attorneys have volunteered to represent Steve Baker in any criminal proceedings brought against him by the DOJ. And I'm going to do everything I can to help as well. Whatever we can do here to help. If they charge this guy, man, it's going to be all hands on deck. Now, we all became acquainted with Steve over the past 18 months. Why? Because his daily coverage from inside the courtroom during the Oath Keepers organization. Now, Steve Baker was at the Capitol on J6, capturing events that day on video and taking notes for later reporting. And he provided access to his video to numerous media outlets. But in July, Steve Baker was first advised he was under investigation. And so in August, an interview with the FBI was arranged, but guess what? It was canceled at the last minute. The FBI canceled the meeting. In October then, Steve submitted to a 2-hour interview with FBI agents about his actions. In November, Steve's attorney was told in an email, so they sent him, oh, well, thanks for the interview. You could be charged within the week. That was 26 months ago. No charges have yet been filed. Now, in August 2023, the DOJ then came back and they served Steve with a grand jury subpoena. Why? Videos that were taken by him on January 6th. So he said, no problem. He compiled and produced the material. Then in December of last year, the FBI again contacted Steve's attorney and advised him that charges were about to be unsealed and Steve should appear in court in Raleigh, North Carolina on December 19th. But the very next day, the same FBI agent contacted Steve's attorney to advise him the matter was being postponed. So get on a plane. You've got court tomorrow. And then actually don't. A member of Steve's legal team, these guys, is amazing, right? I don't know if he lives in North Carolina or where he's at, but that's where they were going to unseal everything and then maybe take him into custody and bring him back over to DC. I don't know. So a member of Steve's legal team spoke with the federal prosecutor in charge of the investigation shortly thereafter and said, well, a final decision on whether to charge Steve had not yet been made, and he would not disclose what possible charges were being considered. So they're just jerking him around, okay? They're like just yanking him around. This FBI agent hasn't decided, but that's the FBI agent, right? Now he talks to the federal prosecutor. So the FBI said, go to Raleigh. He says, no, we're not doing that. How about I call the actual lawyer, the prosecutor on the case? And he says, well, maybe not yet. Now, during that call, an explicit assurance was given that if Steve was indicted, it would be communicated to his legal team and voluntary appearance in DC for an arraignment would be coordinated. We call this a self-surrender, which is a nice thing to do, especially when you have a compliant defendant. But they don't want to do that. They want to raid everybody's houses. So Steve would not be subject to the public spectacle of a surprise arrest in the early morning hours at his residence. But that's what they want, though. They really want that for the cameras. Now, notwithstanding his knowledge of all of the above, Steve has been unrelenting on reporting about J6. He has, and he's been doing awesome work. We need him to be able to continue to do his work. Hundreds of hours of work by Steve resulted in him uncovering video evidence that calls into question the truthfulness of testimony by two key witnesses during the first Oath Keeper trial. Two Capitol police officers called Harry Dunn, that big goofy guy, and David Lazarus. Dunn's running for Congress. Now, Lazarus was the dignitary protection detail of Nancy Pelosi. Oh, kind of important. The video evidence discovered by Steve Baker contradicts Lazarus's testimony. In other words, the video says that Lazarus is lying as to his location with respect to a key allegation against some Oath Keeper defendants. So Nancy Pelosi's protection detail dignitary lied, and Steve Baker uncovered it. Now, the video evidence discovered by Steve also shows Lazarus was at a different location in the Capitol at a time when he testified that he witnessed a confrontation between Officer Dunn and the Oath Keepers. Okay, so Harry Dunn is the guy who's running for Congress, says he's got PTSD, all the things, and then wrote this, interesting video, made this interesting video. This is what he looks like, just so we all know who we're talking about. Harry Dunn, Capitol police officer. He's saying that Officer Dunn got into it with the Oath Keepers. And this guy, as we know, was running around, dropping the magazine out of his gun. He was screaming at people. He was saying people were being taken out on stretchers. Like, he made up a bunch of stuff that's not accurate. So he made up a story about the Oath Keepers, testified there at trial. Lazarus says, I was there. I saw the whole thing. No, you didn't. Video shows you didn't. You were in a different location when you said that altercation happened. Now, Lazarus's testimony was critical to corroborating Dunn's version of the events. because Dunn had changed his description of the events multiple times. Now, starting with his original reports and his interviews, followed by his new statements to the J6 committee. Then the description in his book changed, and finally, he then had a different story back during the Oath Keepers trial. Now, Steve has been reporting on this issue for several months. He also talked to Harry Dunn multiple times. It's amazing. I can't believe he talked to you. But it was only 8 days ago that Steve received permission to publish the video that actually does show that Lazarus is in a literal different location than Harry Dunn when the confrontation happened. Not there. Now, more recently on Wednesday, January 17th, Steve and the Blaze were the first to report that multiple congressional sources confirmed that the person who first discovered the pipe bomb at the DNC on January 6th was not a passerby, as they lied to us about, but rather it was a Capitol Police officer in plain clothes. Undercover. Weird. Now, for 3 years, the DOJ and the Capitol Police have withheld the identity of this person who walked by and looked at it. And for nearly a year, the DOJ also misrepresented, lied in court filings that then Vice President Kamala was inside the Capitol ahead of the proceedings involving the counting of the votes. That was a lie. That turned out not to be true. Evidence showed she was at the DNC headquarters, a short distance away from the Capitol, at the very time the pipe bomb was supposedly discovered by the passerby, turns out Capitol Police, from outside the building. Now, as Steve's reporting revealed, video evidence shows a near total disinterest by the Secret Service agents assigned to VP Harris's protective detail when the pipe bomb was supposedly found. And curiously, the Secret Service cannot produce any of its various forms of internal communications, whether they're audio recordings or otherwise, from January 6th. The cover-up continues. Where are the Secret Service convos? Gone. I'm just gone. It's the Secret Service, you know, Rob. They're very secretive. No, aren't they supposed to be, you know, protecting all of us and reassembling what went wrong so that we can make sure it doesn't go wrong again? And Kamala almost got exploded by this pipe bomb and there's no data about it? Weird. So the latest reveal by Steve and other media has created a firestorm and a media frenzy because there is simply no question that the public and the press have been lied to about the pipe bomb incident. But the press doesn't care. They like being lied to. The DOJ was forced to correct the misrepresentations made in court documents about the location of VP Harris, having alleged in many early cases that she was inside the Capitol, but she was not. They lied about that. They know she was at the DNC headquarters. Now, the belief among many in the J6 defense community has long been that the pipe bombs at the DNC and the RNC offices were a ruse meant to draw manpower of the Capitol Police away. At the same time, the crowd was anticipated to begin arriving and planned and permitted the protests for a planned and permitted protest to be taking place. It's believed that the need to address the pipe bombs was going to be offered as an excuse for why the Capitol Police were undermanned and unprepared to maintain security at the Capitol grounds. They needed a fake because. Well, why wasn't the Capitol protected? Well, because they were over there attending to the pipe bombs. Now, there was a politically motivated desire for the scheduled and permitted protest activities to become unruly. Yeah, Nancy Pelosi said, I've been waiting for this. But an excuse had to be created for why the Capitol Police, 2,000 people strong, would not be able to control the situation. Such an excuse could not create embarrassment for the leadership of that force. And this is something that we've been screaming about for a long time. This was all planned, okay? Everybody knew that they were coming. Everybody knew that there were going to be protests. They knew it was going to be a big one. Why did we see fences on January 6th that looked like an 8-year-old could hurdle over them? And probably do, actually. I mean, they're like 3 feet tall. I bet 8-year-olds could easily hurdle over that. Ray Epps and some of those guys at that West Gate, they just start knocking it over. A strong wind will blow it over. But when the Palestinian protesters show up at the front door of the White House, they've got monstrous fences there, don't they? Huge, tall, I don't know, 12 feet tall. You are not knocking those over. People trying to climb on them, they're knocking them down. Right? They know how to secure a building when they want to secure a building. And when that happened at the White House, Joe Biden hopped on an airplane and left, right? So they can secure a building. The fact that they didn't means they wanted it to happen, or they were grossly negligent. But how can they be so negligent with 2,000 people plus the Metro PD? They rejected the National Guard. They can't even secure the building where all of our representatives and senators are. They can't secure that. They're much more incompetent than I even ever thought. It's either gross incompetence or intentionality. It's not they were overwhelmed with tremendous force. How do I know that? There were 1,200 people who got charged with crimes. So if there's 2,000 Capitol Police and they only charged 1,200 people with crimes, and by the way, half those already pled out and they were like disorderly conduct, criminal trespass charges. 1,200 total people got charged. So don't tell me it's like 50,000 criminals. No. And that's, by the way, a tiny small number. You know how many crimes there are in Washington, D.C. every year? 34,000. I looked it up. 34,000 was the number in Washington, D.C. That includes property property crimes and all the misdemeanors and all the things. I looked it up. So there were 1,200 on this one day, and the entire DOJ, the entire Department of Justice, for 3 years has been twisting themselves into pretzels, whereas 34,000 is a monstrous number. So this is just a joke, okay? They just they're making all they can out of this. Now, they say all of the above information is now here put forward. Why? And this is going over to the DOJ, right? We see this, or this is his statement. And so we'll see if anybody at the DOJ actually reads it. They say, we now have information that Steve's reporting has so agitated officials in multiple federal agencies, of course, because they're liars, and he's proving them to be liars, that an effort is now underway to find a basis to charge Steve with more serious crimes and to use those more serious crimes as a pretext for early morning raids to execute search and arrest warrants on him and his family. So brace for it, my friends. If this is true and search and arrest warrants are used to drag Steve out of his house in the early morning hours someday soon, that's going to be evidence of retaliation against a journalist exercising his First Amendment rights to report information that is embarrassing to government officials, saying this will be another breaking of institutional norms by the DOJ. Now, among the undersigned counsel are former prosecutors with the DOJ, each having served for more than 20 years, who have witnessed the breaking of other norms of DOJ policy and procedure over the past 3 years, such as using arrest warrants and SWAT raids to apprehend persons charged with only misdemeanors. We say it all the time here, break glass in case of emergency. Donald Trump and the MAGA movement, that's the emergency. So they are weaponizing everything, shattering all this historical precedent. It's the time. Like, when we look back and we say, when was the attempt by the ruling power to seize control of the entire country? We are living in it. It's right now. Now a journalist reporting facts that are embarrassing to the government, now he's being targeted for prosecution. There were dozens of members of the media working for various organizations, as well as numerous independent freelance journalists like Steve, who were present at the Capitol. Many went inside the Capitol building to capture what was happening there. We have been compiling a list of all the journalists over the past several months who've been there, and we're going to be calling upon those journalists and their employers to publicly stand in favor of the First Amendment and to denounce any effort by the DOJ to prosecute Steve. Steve's actions on J6 have been known to the DOJ for 3 years, but it's only now, after Steve broke 2 major stories that greatly embarrassed the DOJ, that he's possibly being targeted for arrest and possible felony prosecution. Any action taken to put him in handcuffs, to hold him in custody, and to have him transported to court by federal law will be nothing other than retaliation. As Steve's counsel, all volunteers, issue the following challenge to the DOJ. Hey, DOJ punks! If you are so convinced in the strength of your case against Steve Baker, or any J6ers, that you file charges against him in DC, the District of Columbia, we invite you to join in a stipulation with the defense. Why don't we have Steve's case tried in the Eastern District of North Carolina? How about that? Why don't you try your case in the Northern District of Texas and see how that goes? Are citizens of North Carolina, are citizens of Texas not suitable for jurors in Steve's case? A jury of your peers. Why is every case happening in DC? Why don't you take it over to Texas and see what they say? Is the federal judiciary in those 2 districts not able to provide a fair and impartial trial? Of course, well, it is fair and impartial. That's the problem. Yes, they can. That's the problem. On what basis does the US DOJ believe that, quote, the United States can only get a fair trial in DC and not one of those United States? Great letter signed by these amazing lawyers. Ultra mega shout outs to these lawyers for signing their names to this and for standing up for what is right on behalf of Steve Baker. And of course, we're going to do what we can do to shine that beautiful spotlight on this, to continue our support of Stephen Baker and the rest of his team. And so, my friends, spread this far and wide. Tell this to everybody that you know so that they know what the DOJ is doing. Okay, this guy has come out and you've probably already seen his work with the pipe bomber and other things. Darren Beatty, a lot of people talking about it. So it is now the DOJ coming back out to put an end to this because it's too damaging for them. It's too hurtful to their fake narrative. And so we're going to be circling the wagon, supporting Steve Baker, supporting Loudermilk as we continue to get to the bottom of this, my friends. We hope you join us. This PDF and the rest of the mind map actions are all available at robertgovea.com. You can sign up for our daily newsletter there. You can read the summary of all these show reports and segments. You can shop, buy a hat, buy a shirt at the shop, support the show, all at robertgovea.com. The link is down in the description below, and we're going to be covering this J6 stuff until the truth is fully exposed, and we'll look forward to seeing you back here as we do.